Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into some lesser-known facts about North Korea's history that might surprise you. Now, you might be thinking, North Korea, isn't that like the place with the really intense haircuts and the parades where everyone looks vaguely terrified? And yes, while that's not entirely inaccurate, North Korea's story is far more complex and, frankly, more interesting than just a punchline about synchronized goose-stepping. It's a tale of Cold War machinations, devastating conflict, and a leadership cult so overblown it would make a Roman emperor blush. So, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to delve into the Hermit Kingdom, and trust me, it's way weirder in there than you think. Now, you can't talk about North Korea's isolation without discussing the Korean War. From 1950 to 1953, this wasn't just a regional conflict, it was a proxy war between the US-backed South and the Soviet and Chinese-supported North. The war solidified the division of the peninsula, creating a stark contrast between the capitalist South and the communist North. Imagine two siblings raised by completely different families, one with a strict no dessert before dinner rule, and the other with a go-ahead, eat all the candy you want philosophy. After the war, North Korea, under Kim Il-sung, adopted a policy of juche, which essentially translates to self-reliance. Think of it like extreme, off-the-grid living, except on a national scale. It was a way to rebuild the country after the devastation of war, but it also laid the groundwork for the isolationist policies we see today. Juche wasn't just about rebuilding, it was about control. It was about creating a narrative of self-sufficiency, even if that meant cutting itself off from potential aid and engagement with the outside world. And this narrative, well, it was meticulously crafted and relentlessly reinforced through state propaganda. This period saw the rise of a personality cult around Kim Il-sung, portraying him as the infallible savior of the nation. Think of it like building a massive, impenetrable wall of propaganda with Kim Il-sung's face plastered on every brick. And behind that wall, a carefully curated reality designed to keep outside influences out and internal dissent, well, non-existent. Over time, this isolation deepened, fueled by a complex mix of paranoia, ideology, and a desire to maintain absolute control over the population. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 only intensified this sense of isolation. It's like that moment you realize the only other person at the party who shared your love for polka music and pickled eggs just left, leaving you alone with your collection of commemorative spoons. Now, let's rewind a bit and talk about the Soviet Union's role in all of this, because, let's be honest, no story about Cold War shenanigans is complete without those comrades. After World War II, Korea, which had been under Japanese rule, was effectively split in two, with the Soviets taking the North and the Americans taking the South. The Soviets, eager to expand their sphere of influence, saw North Korea as the perfect opportunity. They propped up Kim Il-sung, a young communist leader who had fought against the Japanese, and helped him establish a Soviet-style government. Think of it like a political makeover show, but instead of out with the old, in with the new, it was more like out with the Japanese colonial rule, in with the communist dictatorship. Now, Kim Il-sung wasn't just a passive player in all of this, he was a shrewd operator who quickly consolidated his power and ruthlessly eliminated any opposition. He built a cult of personality around himself, portraying himself as the father of the nation, a benevolent leader who would guide his people to prosperity. Of course, this prosperity came at a cost, namely the suppression of any dissent, the curtailing of personal freedoms, and a healthy dose of paranoia about the outside world. The Soviets provided North Korea with military aid, economic assistance, and a healthy dose of ideological guidance. They were like that friend who helps you move into your first apartment, except instead of helping you assemble IKEA furniture, they were helping you establish a totalitarian regime. But as with many relationships born out of convenience, the Soviet Union's enthusiasm for North Korea began to wane over time. By the 1970s, the Sino-Soviet split, which was essentially a very public and very messy communist breakup, put a strain on the relationship. North Korea found itself caught in the middle, forced to choose between its two communist benefactors. Despite the cooling relations, the Soviet Union's influence on North Korea remained significant. All right, let's talk about the Korean War, because no discussion about North Korea's past would be complete without mentioning the 3-year brawl that shaped the peninsula for decades to come. The war wasn't just about territory, it was about ideology, a clash between the capitalist US-backed South and the communist Soviet-supported North. It was a proxy war, a way for the world's superpowers to duke it out without, actually nuking each other into oblivion. Think of it like a Cold War-era rap battle, with each side spitting rhymes about the virtues of their respective ideologies, except instead of microphones, they were using tanks and artillery. The war devastated the Korean peninsula, leaving millions dead and the North in ruins. But amidst the rubble, something else emerged, a hardened sense of national identity, fueled by a potent cocktail of anti-American sentiment and a belief in their own righteousness. It's like that moment you realize you accidentally wore mismatched socks to a job interview, but instead of admitting defeat, you decide to own it, rocking those mismatched socks like a boss. The war also cemented the Kim dynasty's grip on power. Kim Il-sung, hailed as the defender of the nation, used the war to purge his rivals and consolidate his control. Think of it like a really intense game of musical chairs, except instead of losing your seat, you lost your life, and the only person who knew the rules was Kim Il-sung. The war's legacy extended far beyond the battlefield. It fueled North Korea's paranoia, its isolationist tendencies, and its militaristic culture. It created a siege mentality, a belief that the world was out to get them and that they needed to be constantly prepared for war. The Korean War's impact on North Korea's psyche cannot be overstated. It's the reason they have mandatory military service, the reason they spend an exorbitant amount of their budget on their military, and the reason they're so suspicious of the outside world. Now, let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Kim Il-sung, the eternal president of North Korea. This is a man who makes dictator chic look like amateur hour. We're talking about a level of personality cult that would make even the most narcissistic Hollywood starlet blush. Kim Il-sung wasn't just a leader, he was a deity in a Mao suit. His portraits adorned every building, his statues towered over every town square, and his birthday was a national holiday celebrated with the kind of fervor usually reserved for the second coming of, well, any deity. Imagine a world where your face is on the money, your name is on every school textbook, and your birthday is celebrated with more enthusiasm than Christmas, and you're getting close to the Kim Il-sung experience. But behind the carefully crafted image of the benevolent father figure lurked a ruthless dictator who brooked no opposition. He ruled with an iron fist, silencing dissent, purging his enemies, and creating a system where loyalty to the Kim family was paramount. Think of it like a game of chess where all the pieces are programmed to love and obey the king, and any piece that steps out of line mysteriously disappears from the board. Kim Il-sung's policies had a profound and lasting impact on North Korea. He implemented a command economy, nationalized industries, and collectivized agriculture, transforming North Korea from a largely agrarian society into an industrial one. Imagine a country where the government decides what you eat, where you work, and what you wear, and you're starting to get a sense of life under Kim Il-sung's rule. He also invested heavily in education and healthcare, achieving impressive literacy rates and improving public health outcomes. But these achievements came at a cost. Individual freedoms were non-existent. Freedom of speech was a distant dream, and the only news you were allowed to consume was the state-sanctioned propaganda that flowed from the government like water from a tap. So there you have it. A glimpse into the secretive past of North Korea, a country often shrouded in mystery and misinformation. Thanks for watching. If you found these facts interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. And remember, the next time you hear someone crack a joke about North Korea, take a moment to remember the human stories behind the headlines, the millions of people living in the shadow of a system they didn't create.